Today on The State of Us, voters disagree on American greatness and the value of work. Welcome to The State of Us. I'm your host, Justin T. Weller, joined today by the one and only, your friendly redneck liberal and the senior resident historian here at True Chat, Mr. Lance Jackson.
But we're worried about whether or not work is valuable today and whether or not America's got a good future.
Yeah, so
among the voters.
There's a few things the data reveals.
I think split male-female, young, old.
More Democrat-Republican.
Democrat-Republican, everybody's favorite split.
Everybody's favorite.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. But voters do agree on some things, and there is some positive news. I guess I don't know if it's positive. I shouldn't say that it's positive. We'll talk about that.
Okay.
The vast majority of Republican voters, 85%, believe that anyone who works hard can get ahead, while 53% of Democrats feel that way. So the majority of all voters, right, of all Democrats and Republicans, feel that if you work hard, you can get ahead. One of the problems that I think exists with that statement is there's a couple of highly subjective items in there, right? What do you mean work hard?
I was getting ready. Yep.
And what do you mean get ahead? You know, what do those things mean to different people? So for example, what I'm getting at here is I'm not picking at any one side. If you start at a really bad spot, right, and you go from being homeless to having a roof over your head, that's a huge improvement, right? I mean, that relatively speaking, like that's a massive improvement. So you've gotten ahead. Now you may still not have a job and you may not be able to feed yourself and you may not be, but like, so what do we mean get ahead? I guess part of what I'm getting at there is when you're asking people these questions, part of what you may be getting is a mismatch, which we're going to talk about some of the other data that indicates where that mismatch might come in about how Republicans and Democrats are defining working hard and getting ahead.
The word hard, the fourth definition out of 20, demanding great physical or mental effort or labor, fatiguing, difficult, specifically difficult to do, hard work. So if you're working hard enough to put great demands on your physical wellness and your mental effort, and you're fatigued, and it's really hard to keep doing it, that would be one definition of hard work. So you have to go home every day, and the muscles have to be tired, and your brain has to be fried, and you get up and do it day after day after day after day. That's one definition of hard work. Don't know that that's what the 53% of Democrats and 85% of Republicans meant by hard work, but that's Mr. Webster's definition of hard, and then you put your work in there, the work part.
Hard working, as defined by Merriam-Webster in 2022, is constantly, regularly, or habitually engaged in earnest and energetic work, industrious, diligent. So
if you work, I don't know, not that we would have to interpret that. So if you're working 60 to 80 hours a week, then you can be successful. Would you call 40 hours a week successful?
Well, and that's the...
is that hard work?
I think that's part of the mismatch, you know what I mean?
Yeah, is 40 hours a week hard work?
Well, because the other thing is, we also like to do the hour game, right? And not all hours are created equally. I mean,
sure.
Like if you and I are like... Somebody that's going to the coal mine every day and working 40 hours a week, right, probably has a bigger claim to the hard work than the person that, what do we want to use, is the cashier at
Oh, but then
Kroger.
You have to put up with the public versus just...
But see, that depends on the person though too, right? Because you might be happier in the coal mine and that might not be as hard for you, while somebody else would hate that, but would love being the cashier because they like people and interaction. So I guess the point is, I'm not trying to invalidate this. All I'm trying to do is help people understand one of the reasons I think for the mismatch is if you take the question just literally, if you work hard, can you get ahead? Everybody should answer the question in the affirmative because there's no defining that, right? If you're willing to work as hard as it to do whatever it takes to get ahead, can you get ahead? Sure. If you're willing to do anything. Should you be willing to do anything is
or
kind
should you
of
have to?
Should you have to?
You know,
and I think that's part of what
work,
tempers the Democrats.
Right. And if somebody asks you that question, you're going to answer it based on what your definition. This is what I see. You're going to answer it based on your definition of hard work, and I will answer it based on my definition of hard work. And everybody's going to have. So yes, this is what they said, but there's not a definitive answer to what hard work is. It's something that we all know it when we see it, right? We all have our own idea for it. But I know, talking with, family and friends in the recent holidays, my definition of hard work and their definition of hard work are different. And not necessarily bad, but it's different.
It doesn't make one right or wrong per se.
Right.
Because again, like we just established, it's very relative. What is hard for you may not be hard for somebody else.
I joke with my kids all the time, and I've told you off air, they're like, Dad, you're retired. Take it easy. And I look at them and I say, well, I used to work 65, 70 hours a week. I'm down to less than 40. I'm still working 30 to 40.
So for me,
to me, I'm not working hard anymore. But to them, it doesn't fit their definition of retired.
Right.
Dad, you're still obligated to other people, other places, 30 to 40 hours
a week.
And you're retired.
Well, and you highlighted a thing there too about differences in age and how that might be defined as well, right? Because part of the question isn't just how we define hard work, but how successful have you been in your life as a result of hard work? In other words, we know, for example...
Well, and was it the hard work that made you successful? Or were you lucky enough to live during a time when the money went further and had more value and...
All those many things.
All of those things.
But it's based on your personal experience. So when we look at Republicans as a demographic group, generally trending older, right? They've had more time in life to be successful, generally speaking. I mean, that's just the reality.
Since they're older, we can go back and show that during their lifetime, it was easier economically to get ahead.
You can see him in pain when he mentions that, by the way.
Well, I'm choosing my words.
Because you do have a boomer here that's saying this. So.
Well, but I also have my daughter who has pointed out to me religiously.
She gets good credit for this.
That my minimum wage job when I was a teenager and in college is worth almost what she's making now with 2 advanced degrees working in the medical field.
Right. So,
and people, I did not say that. I did not misrepresent that. Okay. Yeah. The $335 I made was in the neighborhood of what she was making for a while as a full-time college graduate with 1 degree.
Yep.
So being older, my point though is being older, I made money at a time when the money went further than it does now.
Well, and that's then the flip side of that, right, is the Democrats who generally speaking trend younger in the demographic market. Those younger people are less likely on the whole, which we already know, to say that they believe the American dream is attainable for them. They think that it's attainable for some people, but they don't always personally identify it as attainable. So I guess what we're getting at here is it's not just because, for example, Lance and I may come up with a very similar definition of hard work, right? But the question isn't just working hard. It's anyone who works hard can get ahead. And what you have is there's more skepticism among Democrats than there are among Republicans that say that's not necessarily true because you may work hard. And just keep in mind,
10 years ago, I would have agreed with that statement.
Yeah.
I don't agree with it now.
Yeah.
In 10 years, as an older person, my eyes have been changed. I've watched a lot of people who I think are working very hard, but their pay is not commensurate to their work. Therefore, they are struggling to get ahead.
Part of what's very interesting about
what I think is getting ahead.
Right. Well, and there's the other, like we said, a lot of very subjective terms there that are what's getting ahead for you. Because for example, Lance and I have worked with some young people who getting ahead for them would be buying the new game console.
Right.
That may not be what Lance or I define as like, oh yeah, they're getting ahead now, by God, because they bought that new, like that may not be the measure of quote unquote success that we would measure that by. Only a third of Republicans, 34%, think that the current generation will do better than the one that came before. Whereas 55% of Democrats think that. Now,
interesting.
The reason that this is, I think, really notable is listen to this first stat we shared, right? 53% of Democrats say that if people work hard, they're likely to get ahead. 55% of Democrats then also say that the current generation will do better than the last. So those statistics are pretty close. In other words, it might not be fair to assume, but we could gander that many of the people who said, if you work hard, you will get ahead, are also the people who said they think this generation will do better than the last generation. It's realistic to assume that. The thing that's very interesting is that 85%, right, of Republicans say that if people work hard, they can get ahead. But only 34% of Republicans think that the current generation is going to do better than the last.
So what are those old Republicans saying about the younger generation?
They're lazy. They're worthless.
Does it say
and
that?
their troubles are all their own.
Did the author of that article say that, or is that Justin saying
No, this
that?
is a supposition. This is a facetious expose. How's that?
Fair enough.
Can we have one of those as the word of the day? I can't believe those.
Expose?
Yeah, expose.
We can.
Mm-hmm. And facetious. I like facetious.
You like facetious.
Yep. I'm feeling facetious.
So the old Republicans, according to Justin, do not think the younger generations work hard.
What's the definition of facetious, Lance? Treating serious issues with deliberately inappropriate humor, being flippant.
Okay.
So let's talk about that. Keep it here on The State of Us. We'll be right back. So Democrats seem to relatively agree, or at least the same percentage of Democrats seem to agree, that if you work hard, you can get ahead in America, and that the current generation will do better than the last. I mean, it's 53% to 55% respectively, so it's very close. Interesting, though, that there's like that 2% that apparently think that you're going to do better than the last, but that
we're not even addressing the
you.
45 and 47% that say they're not going to do as well.
Right? Yeah.
Understand with that?
Yeah, we're going to talk.
It's a coin flip among the Democrats on whether or not all your hard work's going to pay off or not.
But Republicans are very definitive in their, if people work hard, they can get ahead. I mean, 8 in 10, more than 8 in 10 Republicans agree with that statement, but only 3 in 10 believe that if you work hard, or that this generation is going to do better than the last. So what, as one of those older individuals, Lance, although not a self-identified Republican, what would you surmise are they saying? Non-facetiously. I mean, because that's the easy conclusion to draw, is the thing that I flippantly said right at the end of the last. Is that what they're saying is that if you just worked hard, you'd get ahead. And the reason the current generation is not going to do better than the last is because they're lazy and they won't work hard.
No, I mean, I think that's exactly what they're saying. I think they're pointing the finger and saying that. And since I know some hardworking millennials who,
some lazy ones too, though,
I do know some lazy ones. Okay. But even the hardworking ones are struggling to meet my definition of getting ahead. But now there are times when.
So they meet your definition of working hard.
Well, no.
Oh, see there now.
Well, they kind of do. They kind of do. I mean, they
check some of the boxes.
They check some of the boxes.
Yes.
Okay. I still, and this is where the old man bias comes in. All right. Okay. And I apologize.
Here's the friendly redneck liberal boomer.
Yeah. Is that they have the desire to reach certain goals sooner than I did. And they base their success or failure over having reached those goals. And some of them are legitimate because the economy has put them behind the 8 ball and they're not there yet. They can't do it.
So you're saying the answer is nuanced?
It very much is.
It's not fair to blanket statement it.
It's not.
Oh, okay.
And there are other things that they've made decisions to do which have put them behind the 8 ball as well. So it is a mixture. It is nuanced, and there isn't a blanket statement to say. But yet they are told by their boomer bosses that they work harder than any millennials who work under that boomer boss. So now that one bothers me, right? If you're a boomer boss and you look at it, wow, you're one of my best employees, but you can't make it. Well, that's how they refer to the people above them.
What do you do if you're a millennial boss that has boomer subordinates? How's that work?
Well, that's your problem.
Okay. That's called being smart, because you get the hard workers and you don't have to work hard. You get them to do it.
Right. And they're not
wear out those old
and they don't need
crack
to
the whip.
Yeah. And they're not looking to make a lot of money because they're already settled in their time.
Genius is what you're saying. Yeah. Pretty much.
Well, except you can't make any money either.
Well, that's yeah.
But no, I think there is a disconnect here because my millennial daughters will complain about how their workplaces are stagnated by people who aren't open to new ideas and new ways to do things. And I guess my workplace as the teacher was that way, but when I closed the doors, I could do what I wanted. And so I could try new things. And then because I was successful, but then I was allowed to continue to do them. But I wasn't paid better. Not to get into that, but I had that where I knew what I was going to make every year. And everybody knows because it's public record. So there's just a lot going on right now, I mean, do you think what other, and I've been trying to
I want to get to the next one.
Because I don't know.
Because I think the next one builds into this.
Is there another answer? Is there something other than the fact that they don't think they're working hard enough? And the millennials that I know, most of them are working pretty hard.
Right. So the next one is America is the greatest country in the world. Now, this is one we talked about a number of years ago, but I don't think we've visited it in quite some time. I was kind of surprised at the results. And I don't know if maybe that says something about how I would answer the question, but here's what you got. 91% of Republicans, so 9 in 10 Republicans say, yes, America is the greatest country in the world. Maybe that's a little higher than I thought it'd be, but if you had asked me, I probably would have guessed 8 and 10. That's probably what I would have guessed. So I would have been a little low, but we'd be in the ballpark.
Oh, I would have guessed 2 of the 9% that said no.
Can we find those people? They didn't understand the question.
I understand.
I'm sorry. That's mean. But to me, that's not the surprising part. Okay. That's really not. The surprising bit is that 61% of Democrats, 6 in 10 Democrats agree with the statement that it's the greatest country in the world. And I just think about all the time, all these, new Democrats that I see who talk about how terrible America is and all these things that are wrong. And that is what I wanted to get to about linking this back to the other one. How does the messaging that's being used to critique what's going on impact how we feel things are going? And I guess what I mean by that is the assumption, right? The assumption is that if I stand up and I'm highly critical of what's going on, that then I think everything sucks. In other words, if I'm a Democrat, right, and I say, well, America's terrible at this, we're terrible at this, we're terrible at this, we got to fix this, we got to fix this, it's like, well, man, it doesn't sound like this is very good. It sounds like you don't like America very well. No, I love America. I want to fix these things.
Well,
but people don't make that. And I don't mean, and when I say people, I don't mean just Republicans. I'm talking about Democrats, Republicans, everybody. I don't think we always make that connection. And that's why I wanted to get to this one.
You know why America is so great?
Why?
Because you can say all of those things and nobody's coming to lock you up or whip you or throw you in jail or kill you. The fact that I can stand up and I feel like say what I think, and work to change it is what makes this country so great. I'm not standing up here waving a flag and being patriotic because I think we do everything better than everybody else in the world. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is when we have our troubles, we rely on a democracy to make the changes. And you're like, yeah, but democracy doesn't work. Yes, it does. But things don't deteriorate quickly and they don't change quickly in a democracy. You can go to theocracy. You can go to a tyrannical despot and things can change on a dime, but you don't have a voice in that change. I have the older millennials who are, ranting and raving about our economy because they want a free market economy. They want to do away with all government regulations and you negotiate for the price of a loaf of bread every time you walk into the store. So when you look and say, well, you're just surrounding yourself with a certain kind of people. No, I've got friends on both ends of the spectrum and the reason I talk to them is because they open up my eyes. They open up my brain and they're like, God, I never thought of that before.
Because the reality is, right, we always talk about like, oh, it'd be terrible if we did this or it'd be terrible if we did that. But in both of those things that you just mentioned, in both philosophies, I can think of things in both that would be good, and things in both that would be bad. And that's, I guess.
But do we want a tyrannical despot to just say tomorrow,
yeah,
we're going to do this?
So
I don't think we do, really. I don't think we really want that. But do we all have things that we don't like the direction that our country is going? Yes, and we have the freedom to say something about it. And we have the freedom to protest, and we have the freedom to peacefully assemble, and we have the freedom to vote on if we want to change it or not. That you don't find that hardly anywhere else in the world. And still have the freedom to do with our money as we see fit. Our taxes are not bad compared to the countries that people throw up to me all the time who have better health care, better this, better that. That's fine. Paying 60% of your salary to that in taxes to the federal government, go right ahead. Oh, and by the way, who's protecting those countries and allowing them to exist in their, quote, utopian worlds that you're telling me? Oh, it's the United States because that country has no military. And you say, well, let's just get rid of all militaries because then, the world can't kill each other. It's like, have you ever studied any history? It does not work. Humans do not work that way. Even animals don't work that way. If you study the animal kingdom, there is a pecking order. And if you don't defend yourself in the animal kingdom, you die.
So the other thing that comes to mind with the greatness question.
I'm done. Go ahead. I ran and raved long enough.
Is the same thing that we talked about with the first one, which is, interesting that the vast majority of both here agree, right?
Well, I'm surprised that a majority of both parties agree, except for the Republicans who said
I 33%
will be better.
Yeah, the surprising fact is that it's 61% of Democrats. And I don't mean that, I guess I'm not trying to hate on Democrats.
And even the majority of voters agreed that the United States is the best country in the world.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Still a majority are saying that.
A healthy majority of all voters agree that America's the
regardless of political party.
Mm-hmm. Going back to that, there's more that unites us than divides us thing. But, let's talk about, though, what do we mean when we say the greatest country in the world? Because I think that is equally important to understanding why the results are what they are. Keep it here on The State of Us. We'll be right back.
I think you need to lead with your answer because I pretty much just gave mine. The fact that we can have public dissent and still live. Do people understand the number of cultures that live in the United States that you don't find in the rest of the world?
Yeah, I think
we're as much trouble as we have, and I know you can pick up the newspaper or flip your phone or stream the news and see all the horrible things that are going on in the United States. But do you understand that we're trying to do something that I'm not really sure anybody else in the world is trying to do?
We're trying to do it at a scale and we've talked about, the last time we spoke about this is what I came back to, that I think this is a distinguishing feature. Can you find other countries in the world that are democracies, that have a longer lifespan and happier people? Yes. So if that's how we're going to measure whether or not you're the greatest country, right? Not the greatest people, not the greatest success, but the greatest country, as a government, right? Then we would not be, if that's how we were going to measure that standard, if that's all we were going to measure it on. However, and this is why I think, like some of the other stuff, I think it's more nuanced than we like to make it out to be. Pretty much all of those countries that beat us out on those things operate at a scale that is far smaller than we attempt to operate at. And we have 320 million people in this country. And to Lance's point, thousands of subcultures, huge. I mean, and we're not even talking about the macros. We're just talking about all these little tight neighborhoods that have very specific, and again, do other countries have that? Absolutely. Of course they do. But to Lance's point of scale, do most countries that are as large as the United States have that many? And I won't contend that we live harmoniously, because I'm not sure that that's 100% fair, but that live as harmoniously as the cultures do in the United States. It's not a rhetorical question. I really am asking, because I think that this is one where the listeners can get involved. I guess that's part of it's challenging, because part of it depends on, is it really fair to compare, right, the apple to the orange? Which is better? Well, I mean, this is an orange and this is an apple. I may like one better, but in terms of, is one definitively better than the other, greater than the other? How are we choosing greatness? Because if we're basing it purely on health benefits, then maybe we can come to the conclusion that an apple or an orange is better than the other. If we're basing it purely on taste, well, it's going to matter who you're asking. I mean, it's not like, oh yes, the apple is greater than the orange, just that is a fact. Absolutely. If you want to measure greatness by the most powerful military in the world, well, that's easy. I mean, you'd be very hard pressed to find anybody that was speaking logically and honestly who would not say, if we're just going to base the greatest country in the world on who is the militarily the most powerful, well, then the United States wins. And you'd probably get something like 95% of all Americans to agree with that, because it's well, yeah. I mean, duh, is the sky blue? Yes. So there's, I guess
not
what
Ohio,
I'm getting at,
it's gray.
Well, yeah,
this time
it's
of year,
not
it's
blue
always
right
gray.
now, but
Yep.
so no, well, it is blue above the gray. You just can't see it that is one of those things, by the way, that since I started flying, just as a total sidebar, really is fascinating. Because people have always mentioned it, but I never really thought about it. And you get above the clouds, and the sun's out, and it's like, you mean this is like, it's this way all the time up above the clouds? Yep. It's always that way. It's just because you're down here stuck under the clouds that you can't see it. So the sun is always shining, folks. There's a bit of, poetry for you, but it literally always is. It's just a question of whether or not you see it shining.
But back
There's
to
some
what you were
deep-seated philosophy there.
and you're right. But when you wonder then why people are so into aviation, and that describes it. I mean, if you could go up somewhere where you could always see the sunshine and the sky was blue, wow, that would be, who wouldn't want to be up there all the time?
Calm. So I guess what I'm getting at is,
what's your criteria?
Right.
You say, to the point, everything in this show is based on your personal interpretation of the meaning of the words in the question.
Right.
Right. So I would assume that you would answer in the affirmative, that the United States is the greatest country in the world. What's your criteria that makes you say that, when you and I both pick up a paper every morning? And yes, that's what we do. We actually pick up a paper, but
you're right. You're not being facetious.
I'm not being facetious on this one. And we open it up, and we are both hard pressed to find things that make us feel good.
Yes.
On the front page.
Mm-hmm.
Yet we still say we would rather live here than any place else. So, wow, if you just take that simple statement, that's a real mind flip.
Yeah.
You mean, You get up every morning and listen to the news or hear the news or read the news, and there are more things that upset you than make you feel good, and you want to live here instead of any place else in the world? Explain that one to me. That doesn't make much sense. I mean, as I say that, I'm like, I must be a crazy man, is because I feel like I have some power and some control over my personal life and have some abilities to make the people around me better. And that's what I want. And I have a voice, i.e. this show, I have a voice to try to persuade people to do things in the manner that I think would make the country better. And having that ability is what makes us great. Not everything that we do, but the ability to change things for the better.
Part of what's really difficult to separate for any of us that are Americans that listen to this show is a built-in American pride. And I'm sure there's some of you listening, I don't have pride in America. When you are the leading economy in the world, right? The leading military in the world, and you know it, I think it's a bit far-fetched to say that none of us have pride. You know what I mean? Because are we the best at everything? No. Are we the best at lots of things? Yeah. And do we know that we are? Yes. So that in turn it's going to give you a degree of pride. Now, maybe not boastful, right? Maybe not, you're not going to go around and like, oh, so you know, but even people who dislike it, one of the common arguments is that America is supposed to lead the world, so it's important that we set the right example. Well, that's all prefaced on the fact that we lead the world in the first place. In other words, if we were, Finland, then who frickin' cares what we do, because nobody's going to pay attention. I hope anybody listening in Finland that you keep listening. We love your country.
You guys have a great education system, and you take care of your elderly,
right?
And your healthcare system is wonderful.
So, but the point being that if I lived in Finland and said, well, we're the world leaders, so we by God got to do it this way, people would probably be like, well, no, that maybe we should do it that way, but that's not a reason. You know what I mean? So I guess what I'm getting at there is, I struggle with it because do I think that America is a great country? Yes. Do I think that we are the greatest to have ever lived? Got to give me a couple more years on that. I used to answer the question easily in the affirmative, spending a lot of time in American history, which, by the way, despite what you think, doesn't actually make me think it less. In some ways, it makes me think it more, because the fact that we still exist as a nation, in spite of all of the many, many terrible, awful things we've gone through and put our own people through, there's something about that that's worth examining, because when you look at a lot of world history, most countries that have gone through a similar chain of events, they may still technically be a country, but they totally upended their entire government. They started over. They overthrew kings. They did lots of things to change, so it's like saying that Russia's the same Russia of 30 years ago, or that the Russia of 30 years ago is the same Russia of 100 years ago, or that the United Kingdom is the same. And that's just not, the countries like that have changed so drastically that I'm not really sure it's fair to, again, say that they've been the same the whole time and therefore look at what all they've made it through. It's like, well, I don't know if they really, generally speaking, have we added tons of laws? Absolutely. But we are still operating with the same founding document, which we've amended, but really not very, the fact that we've only amended it 27 times in 250 years, that's not very many. We've added lots of other little things, but in terms of core principles, we've really not altered it a great deal. In terms of number of changes, we've made some very fundamental changes in terms of who we are saying is included. So I guess the point in that is, I would say, yes, I think that we're the greatest country in the world, but I'm skeptical. I'm willing to be proved wrong. How's that? I am open to the possibility that I'm not right.
Who has spent years calling me the fence sitter.
I know. I'm saying I struggle with it. I think we're a great country. I love a lot of things about our country. I hate a lot of things about our country too. I'm very disappointed in a lot of things that we've done. At the same time, I don't think that it's a baby in the bathwater situation. You know, we have to work to be better. Just because we haven't done everything the right way doesn't mean that you give up and you say, well, we'll just get rid of it because it's terrible. And to me, that's what makes us great, is that you keep going, you learn, you build, you get better. That's what I think it ought to be about. And that's part of why, like I say, I struggle with it, because if that's how you're going to measure greatness, then for me, it works out that way. Because the more I learn about American history, yes, there are terrible things, but the more I also respect the fact that we've tried to change a lot of those things. And notice that I said tried. I am not going to contend that they're all fixed, because they're not. Some of them are, some of them not. Some of them are more fixed than others. But I think the fact that we've kept going and kept saying, we're going to figure it out. Like, we're not just going to quit, we're not going to give up. We're not going to overthrow the government. We're going to figure this out. We don't know how always, but we're going to get it done. And that probably plays into some kind of definition of hard work. So maybe that's why. But I'm also sensitive to there's a lot of places in the world where people are on average happier than people in the United States are. But that doesn't necessarily make the country greater, I guess is what I'm getting at. It's also a bit pretentious, though, to say that the country that you live in is the greatest country, because obviously we're biased. So we don't live anywhere else. Just like I'm sure there's plenty of our international listeners who might, disagree, which is okay. But that's kind of the point of the show, right, Lance?
Exactly, it is.
Okay.
And, we had this discussion because we like it. But it's also...
there were some stats we didn't get to. I didn't get to share a few of the graphs.
That made the show even better. There were many listeners who are glad we didn't get all your stats.
Okay.
But we at True Chat have a mission, and our mission is to educate people by providing honest, open, and respectful conversations. And we've done that again today. We have been honest and open. We've been respectful. That doesn't mean you agree with us. But again, that's my whole reason for believing that the United States is the best country. So if you've liked today's show and you share it with your friends and they say, well, where can I listen to it? Tell them, as a podcast, we're on Spotify, Overcast, Stitcher, Apple Podcast, and everywhere podcasts are found.
The State of Us is heard Tuesdays and Thursdays as a podcast, first thing in the mornings. We're also heard on the weekends on AM and FM radio stations across the United States and in parts of Canada. Anything else, Lance? We good?
Well, I'm good. I'm ready to go. I'm ready to get on to the next topic.
Roll. Here we go.
I mean, it's an interesting dynamics. Let us know, podcast@stateofus.org, if you have any different.
Send an email, right?
Send us an email, and we'll get back to you, and we'll maybe read it on the air.
If we feel like it. If you say really nice things, it'll probably make it on.
No, you're more likely if you say things you don't agree with us, because really what will get you on the air is if you say something that will make us think.
Yes.
Because that's what we're all about.
Yep.
We want to make people, we don't care whether you agree or disagree with us, as much as we hope that we make you think about things. And that's what we want. We want you to think.
For the State of Us, I'm Justin T. Weller.
I'm Lance Jackson.
Special thanks to producer Bradley Butch. Thank you all, our audience, for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Be the change. Be sure to check out our website, thestateofus.org, for books, articles, and all the ways to tune in. thestateofus.org.